I just want you to know that the love that I feel for you, it doesn't just exist solely inside me. It exists around me and in you now. And that will continue to be here even after I'm gone.
The world lost Colten Wadsworth on November 26th, 2022. He passed away peacefully, surrounded by his loving family, after battling cancer for 3.5 years. Today, you get to hear from his loving wife, Gabby, who you met in our last episode, and she shares how together they navigated Colten's last few years of life. This episode is intended to honor Colten's life, Colten and Gabby's love, and Gabby's continued wisdom and strength, even through life's hardest moment. And she's graciously agreed to share their heartbreakingly beautiful story with us. And ultimately, I think through hearing Gabby and Colten's story, you are going to feel supported and empowered to see and experience death and grief in a whole new way. And it's in a way that I think can help us all to embrace life and death more fully. But before we get started, let's just take a moment to land here together with 3 deep breaths. So just taking a moment to notice where your body makes contact with the earth. And take a big breath in. And exhale, let it out. Again, inhale, fill your chest, fill your belly with air. Exhale, let it go. One more inhale. And exhale. And you can slowly open your eyes as you return to this space. So, to be perfectly honest, I was thinking forever about how to start this conversation, and I don't know that I have the right way or the right words. If it feels all right, Gabby, do you want to maybe time travel with us a little bit and just share a bit about Colten and his story and maybe what it was like when y'all first got his diagnosis?
Yeah. So kind of in reference to our last conversation, the last episode, we had left Mormonism. That was kind of a few really strong emotional years for us, and we had moved around quite a bit, just with jobs, and we moved to Phoenix, and in Phoenix, this would have been probably 2017, and we were there for about a year and a half, and towards the end of our Phoenix era, Colton started to really get this persistent pain in his, kind of his sciatic area, so the back lower hip almost, that we always kind of were thinking it was maybe nerve pain, because he and I were both, we grew up athletes, very active, so kind of having random aches and pains was just normal and would eventually go away. But this pain was kind of starting to persist, and around the end of 2018, Colton ended up not switching jobs, but he ended up just going, kind of taking care of the Colorado division of his current job. And so we moved to Denver.
So right before Gabby and Colten made the move to Colorado, and kind of once they were getting settled there, the pain got really persistent and just wouldn't go away.
The pain just really just became constant. And I just remember how many things we were buying to contraptions, basically, to try and alleviate that pain. Just all sorts of stuff, because his pain was just, it was just constant. And he was taking, the max dose of ibuprofen every single day.
Mm.
And it was by the time we were in Denver at the beginning of 2019, I was starting to get like pretty worried because he had started seeing a chiropractor, and a lot of times, because we have experience with like physical therapy, chiropractic, like all sorts of massage, like again, this was like not necessarily new to us having aches and pains, but it just wasn't getting better. And this particular chiropractor, he kept saying like, this is actually kind of getting worse. And she was like assuring him, like it'll get worse before it gets better. And I was kind of freaking out. And I distinctly remember one night, this would have probably been like a month before getting the diagnosis. He was trying to sleep. It was like really late. I was out in the living room on my laptop, just like kind of Googling all of his symptoms. And I was like, what is this? And one of the things that popped up was sarcoma. And I remember like seeing that. And that was just like, I was like, what? I've never heard of this word in my life. And I like kind of went on a bit of a deep dive on that. And then I was just like, it is not that. Like, that is
I won't
horrible.
play
No.
with that thought. Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely not. And, and then we ended up driving to Idaho from Denver for my little sister's wedding on May 4th. And on her wedding day, like that night, I remember so clearly, because Colton and I at weddings, like, were such a fun time. Like, sorry,
yeah.
Like, it was just fun. Like, I'm not a dancer, but he would bring me out to the dance floor, and we would just dance, like dance the night away, and it was always so fun. And so like that night he could only dance with me for a few minutes, like a few minute intervals, and then he was just, like, I'm so sorry, like this hurts so bad, I just need to like sit.
As Gabby and Colten were heading home from the wedding, they stopped by to visit Colten's old high school PT, and Colten shared with him what had been going on with his pain.
Or this physical therapist was just like, this is not normal. Like, this is not normal. This should not be getting, like, what you're describing to me is bad. Like, it shouldn't. All of these things you're doing, like, you're doing everything right. It should not be getting worse. You should be seeing some improvement at least. And so he was like, you need to go home. You need to find a primary, like, even if it's an urgent care person, like, I don't care if you don't have primary care, find someone and tell them this, and tell them you need to get an MRI. Like, insist on it. And so we did. The doctor was great. He was just like, oh yeah, that does sound horrible. Let's get you some scans ordered. And he got scans a few days after that, and we were just kind of waiting in limbo. And ironically, like, it's just so crazy to think back, because he had all this pain, but at the same time, like, we were still so active. Like, you would never look at him and say, like, oh, this person has cancer. Like, this person's sick. Like, this person has something eating away at him on the inside. Because the day before we got the call, we had gone on an 8-mile hike, like, in Colorado.
Wow.
Like, it was just, yeah. And he was in pain by the end of it, but he had, like, wanted to do it. And the next day we get a call, and it's the doctor, and he's just like, so I don't know what this is, but these scans have already been sent off to every major cancer clinic in the United States, like Mayo, Sloan Kettering, MD Anderson, like all of these things, because he was like, I've never seen this in my life. Like, I've been doing, I've been a GP for 40 years, and I've never seen anything like this, so I don't know what to say. Like, this just doesn't.
Just not what you want to hear.
Yeah. No, he was like, these are what I think it could be. I think it could be maybe a lymphoma, most likely a sarcoma, just with how it looks. Um, but he was like, yeah, we're getting this sent off, and I've also contacted like the cancer centers here. So here are these recommendations, because whatever this is, you need to be talking with like orthopedic uh,
Mm-hmm.
surgeons. Like, basically, let's get a jump start on this. And so um, that was that was so surreal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just remember I was kind of near him, so I was kind of getting bits and pieces of this, and then I was just, I think I remember I had to walk out of the room at one point because I was just like, oh my God, this is not happening. This is not happening. Like,
Yeah.
that there has to be a mistake. Like, maybe this is just some injury, like, that has become crazy. And like, I don't, I knew nothing about cancer and how it worked and what it looked like or anything like that. So
Mm-hmm.
he hung up the phone and he just came and got me, and he was just like, I think they think I have cancer. And I just, he, we just, like, it was just this shock. Like, there was no real emotion for
Mm-hmm.
a good, like, I want to say we just kind of sat in silence, like, looking at each other for a long time. And then we were just like, what do we do? I was like, should you call your mom? Like,
Yeah.
do we
That would have been
call
my
people?
first
Do
thought
we
too.
tell people? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I, and it's, yeah. And
You're like,
so,
I can't handle this on my own. We need like
yeah,
someone to tell me what to do.
I know. And so he did. He called his mom, and she was very much in the same kind, from what I remember, the same kind of like mindset, like, okay, maybe they have this wrong. Like, maybe
Mm-hmm.
this is, we don't actually know anything right now. We know
Mm-hmm.
something's going on. It's not good. Let's hear what everybody has to say. Like, all these, these have been sent off.
Yeah.
Let's wait. And but I think it kind of dawned on Colton after his conversation with his mom, because he just cried, like, in my arms. And I mean, he immediately was like, oh my God, what if, am I gonna die? Like, am I gonna die from this? And of course, I'm just like, no, no, you're
Yeah.
not. I've now made it my mission. Whatever,
I will not allow
whatever
that.
this is, yeah, you will not die. Like, we're in a good city. We have resources. We are going to take advantage of them. And Colton went through, we ended up going in for a biopsy of the tumor. It ended up, of course, being Ewing sarcoma.
Gabby was researching everything she could to advocate for Colton the best that anyone possibly could. And it turns out that this was really necessary because their first oncology experience was not great.
As soon as we got the confirmation of, like, yeah, this is Ewing sarcoma, this is cancer, and I just I did nothing but read for a couple years, honestly, but like,
Mm-hmm.
definitely for a good few months of just straight, just my brain could not consume information about cancer in general, this cancer specifically, and just all of the different. I mean, I looked into every single, like, naturopathic thing, and I looked
Mm-hmm.
into THC stuff. I went to like complementary uh um like things that could complement chemo, things and radiation,
Mm.
like all of these things. So I went like down every single avenue, and like, I was like throwing all of this at Colton. I was like, okay, we need to try this. We're gonna do this. Blah, 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 blah. And we, like, I would have him be doing this, like, some sort of juice cleanse, some sort of putting little, RSO oil. So it's like pure THC oil that you would, like, put as a suppository, and like, I was having him do those,
Like
and like high
everything.
doses. Yes, I was like,
Mm-hmm.
everything. and and so I would have questions, and the first cancer center we went to, um was not a great experience kind of right away. I would kind of like try and ask some of the questions, and I just felt immediately from her that it was like, why are you even asking me any questions? Like, I am the expert. Nothing else should matter.
Don't
And
question what I'm saying.
yes, and I'm just like, and it's
We
kind
know
of
how
funny
that
thinking back, like,
goes.
yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
say, coming from that whole history,
Yeah.
that immediately I was just like, listen, I
Again,
can
go
be
back
like,
and listen to our last
yeah.
episode, and you'll know why that didn't work for Gabby.
I yeah, because the thing is like I was okay with like if I was coming with something and it was just like that wasn't going to work for XYZ, I'm okay with being told that. If it's like
Yeah.
you have something like it's like no that's actually been tried or studied and doesn't work because of
Mm-hmm.
XYZ, like that's okay with me. I am
Yeah.
okay with like being like okay, cool, done.
Yeah.
But that was just not the approach she took at all.
You
And
weren't being
his
heard.
no. And it was it was hard because Colton, from hearing like that it even might be cancer, just understandably slipped into such a deep depressive apathy kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And
Just
so it
like a
was just
resignation. He was just kind of like,
yeah, he's like, this is happening and I don't even want to live right now and I don't want to fight
mm,
any of this and I just kind of have to. And again, all understandable.
yeah.
But I very much felt like because of that, I was the person. Like I
Yeah.
was the person who was going to be his voice, who was going to make
Mm-hmm.
sure he was taken care of properly. And uh yeah, his first chemo um was at that cancer center and
The first round of chemo and care, things were not as supportive for Colton and Gabby as they should have been for a number of reasons.
the first thing was like the line of treatment she wanted to do was one that was kind of outdated with the amount of chemo cycles that he would have had to do.
Mm-hmm.
I would find out later because the most current research showed that you could actually do less and literally get the same, like the percentages of like recurrence versus uh, cure versus all these things were almost the exact same as like doing 14 rounds of chemo versus like 20 or something. So the first chemo, he had his chemo, and before that, they gave him infusions of like pre medication that are supposed to help with the nausea. And um, towards the end, he's starting to get really pale and just not looking well, of course. And he's kind of telling the nurses like, I don't I don't feel well at all. And they were like, okay, yeah. And he's like, no, I feel like I'm in a kind of a mix of like faint and puke at the same time.
Mm.
And um, the nurses went and told the oncologist, and she was just kind of like, well, I gave you the best pre-meds I could. And so here, do you want to try a Sprite and some crackers? And yeah, so obviously that didn't go very well. And
Mm-hmm.
on the way home, I had thankfully kind of looked, I can't remember if it was like a subreddit or something that had like tips for people's first chemo, and they were like, bring a puke bucket or like something to puke into just in case. Like,
Reddit really
so
gives the best advice.
it does. Yeah. Yes, truly. And so I had that because, and I'm glad I did because on the way home, we were maybe 5 minutes from home. He just was like, oh no. Like, and I was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
grabbed the bucket for him and he just was just puking. And then from there, he continued to vomit for like 8 hours, like with a
Mm.
couple, and by the end of it, nothing's coming up, but absolutely nothing
Yeah,
staying
just
down.
dry
He's like,
heaving and
uh-huh. And I called the emergency, like after hours, because it's like evening by this time, after hours, oncology part of the cancer center, and I told them what's going on, and they were like, because I had been trying to give him all of the anti-nausea medications that they had sent home with us. He'd even tried like the suppository version of them, and just nothing, like nothing was touching it. And so they were like, yeah, you should probably go to the emergency room. I was like,
Great.
okay, cool. So I get him, we load up, we go into the emergency room, and he is just, it takes probably an hour before any of the IV meds that they gave him started to work. And then once they did work, it was like, oh, okay. Like he immediately like fell asleep. He just looked so much more just calm. Like everything in his body just looked more relaxed. And I was like, okay, okay, okay.
From that point, Colten was able to start feeling a little less nauseous. He was able to keep down some food. And then midweek, when they went back to the doctor,
His white blood cells, which is basically like your immune system, were very steeply declining, and so he was almost at the point where they call it nadir, which is just like your like blood counts are just flatlined. You have like no immune system. You are the most susceptible to infection and disease and illness and all of this stuff during this period of time. And I found out later that it what is like normal is giving uh, a shot like a day after chemo, um, that is essentially almost like not pretend, but kind of stimulates your white blood cells so that the low like isn't as low, and you can bounce back quicker from it instead of like staying low and like just being flatlined for like weeks, you know. But we you don't know what you don't know. And so a couple days after that, the advice was just like, yeah, be careful, like stay as kind of contained as you can, and until the next chemo, basically. And we're like, okay. So at this point, it's like a week after the first emergency visit, like emergency room visit. And uh the big thing you're supposed to look for is a fever over 100.4. Because if it's over 100.4, you need to go in to the ER, because you have such a slim window as a cancer patient with no immune system of like, if it is an infection, like we need to be getting this like under control immediately. And so he was just in like, he just started become like just in terrible pain like overnight. It was like he just couldn't sleep. He was shaking. He was sweating. He was just inconsolable with how much pain he was in. And then I was checking his temperature, and lo and behold, it went up to I think it was like teetering on the edge. I remember because I was on the phone with the on-call oncologist multiple times that night, because I was like, okay, this is what's going on. It's like at 100.4, but I checked it a couple minutes or 30 minutes later, and it was like 100.3. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing.
And then ultimately, Gabby had to take Colten back to the ER, where fortunately they were able to get Colten's temperature and pain under control.
That happened multiple times throughout the years of his treatment. Was we would have to go to the emergency room, and it would be no infection, but it was like his body was just like wreaking havoc on itself. And so you kind of have to go anyway, even if it you don't know it's not an infection until you don't know. Yeah. And I just remember sitting there, and he was asleep. It was like 2 a.m. My anxiety was so like at level 15, and I just remember thinking, I was like, I can't and we can't do this for a year plus. Like, I cannot imagine us going to the ER every single week. Like, this can't, there, I was like, I have to like look for more. Like, there has to be, this is not the only cancer center. I feel like this can be better managed. I just like, something is not lining up. And so I ended up reaching out to get like a consult with like the cancer center of Colorado, which is the University of Colorado Anschutz Cancer Center, and they have a sarcoma clinic. So it's like they have a whole department that's just dedicated
for
to
that
sarcoma.
type of.
Yeah. And so we did a consult there, and it was like you go onto the university campus, that's like their medical campus, and from like the moment we walked in, Colton and I both felt like, oh, okay, this is already feeling better. Like, it just, because, you know, before they met with us, they had his specific case, Colton, like just Colton, his specific case, his scans, everything, his history, brought before the tumor board, which involves, you know, surgeons. It involves radiation oncologists. It involves multiple oncologists just within the sarcoma clinic. And it's like they all sit around and discuss him, like as a person and as a patient. And like, okay, what do we think based off of him, his treatment should be? Like, how long should it be? Should we incorporate surgery or should we try radiation? Like, what, like, it just felt more human. Like I felt more like he was a person when we went there. And so immediately we were like, okay, yep, we're switching care. And from there it was pretty standard for his first line of treatment. It was brutal. It was honestly the most brutal of he went through treatment for 3.5 years, and it was that like 9 months was the most brutal of any of them because the treatment is just so harsh, because it's like 1 week you are doing, you know, and these are chemotherapies from 60s, 70s, 80s, because Ewing sarcoma is a childhood cancer, and childhood cancer gets like 4% of funding for research. So there's like very rarely developments within it. It's sucks. And so you're getting like the harshest chemos combinations available.
Colten alternated chemo cycles from 2 days of outpatient chemo to chemo cycles of being in the hospital for 5 days.
It was just week after week, month after month, and eventually his blood counts were having a harder time recovering as quickly, so then we had to space out the chemo a little bit until at the end, like we had about halfway through, he did radiation on the tumor, and we had to stop chemo for like 6 weeks or so, and then started it up again. And by April of 2020, which the timing of that was so unfortunate, because in like February, his oncologist, they did scans and they found little nodules in his lungs that he was like, okay, we need to like, this could literally be nothing, but Ewing sarcoma almost always metastasizes first to the lungs, so I want to go in there, get them, and then biopsy them, essentially.
By the time the lung nodules had shown up, the tumor head was almost gone, and everyone assumed that it was dead, which can happen.
They did everything they could. They zapped it with radiation. It got as small as it was going to, and then through time it would be done. And the only thing that could maybe get in the way of that was whatever was happening in the lungs. So in like March, Colton, his oncologist, is like trying to schedule him for that biopsy, and then all of this COVID stuff is happening, and so he is like fighting with like everyone to be like, this is necessary, this is medically necessary, he needs to have this surgery, you need to let him have the surgery. Like yeah, his oncologist really like went to bat for him, and just like, yeah, he was great, and ended up getting the surgery. ended up being the lung nodules were nothing. They were just
Okay.
they were just nodules on his lungs. And so
Good.
after that surgery, we did have a very scary ER trip right after he was discharged because one of his lungs collapsed and he was in such bad pain. Uh, he ended up like passing out, and I had to essentially like drag him to our car and drive him to the emergency room because the emergency room is only 5 minutes away. And I was trying to do this like math in my head of like, okay, is an ambulance going to get here faster than the like 5 minutes I can drive if I can get him in this car? And I drove him, and then I had to drop him off because it was COVID, and I'd never had to do that before, ever. Like, I basically had to drop him off at the doors. Like, I could check him in, and then I had to go. And, like, he was, like, being, like, helped along by these nurses, but it was,
Horrible.
I don't know if I've ever been so hysterical
Yeah.
than that drive home, because it was, oh, yeah, that is, like, burned in my brain. After that, uh, we thought he was all clear because the lung nodules were nothing. So we were pretty happy. We bought a house in the mountains of Colorado because I remember asking Colton, like, before we had gotten the all clear, I was like, okay, so these lung nodules could be something. They could not be something. Let's just say you had a year to live, what would you be doing with that year? Like, what would you want to do? And he was like, I'd probably just want to live in the mountains here. And I was like, okay, well, let's look
We
at
can do
houses.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, we bought a house and it was great. And then Colton started getting pretty persistent migraines, and uh, he was almost due for scans anyway, because they scan you every 3 months for about 5 years after treatment ends. And he was almost due for that first set of scans, and he was telling his oncologist about these migraines that were just getting worse and worse. And his oncologist was like, maybe we'll have you come in earlier than like waiting a few weeks because this could be nothing. In fact, I feel like it probably is nothing, but I really want to make sure. And so, because it's like less than 0.02% chance that Ewing sarcoma metastasizes to your brain first. And so he goes in for scans, and I was driving down to work at my serving job, and it was like 9 a.m. or it was like, no, it was like 8 a.m. because I was opening the restaurant, and I get a call from Colton, and he was just like, it's in my brain. And I was like, what do you mean? It's like, I just got a call from my oncologist, and it's in my brain. And I was like, and I had just pulled into the restaurant, and I like walked in, and the chef manager, whatever, like takes one look at me. And I think his wife had cancer because he and I would talk cancer stuff a little bit. He just took one look at me and was like, what's happening? And I was just like, I think it's in his brain. And he was just like, he gave me a hug, and he was just like, go home. Go home. Do not come back. Do not come back until, like, do not even worry about this place. Do not worry about coming back, anything. And so I did, and we immediately were, back in the hospital, back doing tests, back scheduling surgery for his brain. And in the middle of that, we took a trip to Seattle to see some friends. And I remember him telling me, because he had very much been like, I want this to take me. I cannot do this again. I cannot do this again. Like, this is horrible. I'm not doing it. They can take this out of my brain, and if it comes back, then fine. Like, it can take me. And by the end of that trip, he was just like, I'll give treatment another shot. Like, at the end of the day, I literally just want more time with you. He's like, so even if I'm going to die, I would rather it be later than sooner. And so, um, yeah, they surgically removed the tumor in his brain, which ironically enough, brain surgery is an incredibly easy surgery to recover from for the most
Huh.
part. Like was always his easiest surgery. Like it's crazy. I don't know
Never would
why.
have guessed that.
No, I know. But and then started his next line of treatment.
And that took some trial and error to find the right balance for Colten, but they worked hard to figure it out.
He had like good weeks, which was like unheard of. Like he had whole
Mm-hmm.
weeks. He had like a whole week that we could like do things and he could like live life. And so
Mm-hmm.
that was that was I don't want to say great because it wasn't great, but
That was
comparatively,
better.
that was
Yeah.
great. And so um so we ended up moving to Seattle in 2021. We'd both always wanted to live there. And we could, and so we did, and they had a great sarcoma center there as well. So we had kind of gotten on this track of like we're gonna shoot for a stem cell transplant because I had looked at the statistics almost immediately of what happens when Ewing sarcoma goes to your brain, and it's like 0% survival rate past like a couple years. And but I was a part of a lot of Ewing sarcoma support groups, relapse groups, terminal groups, all of this stuff. And I could remember finding two cases where one of them was someone's granddaughter and one of them was her daughter. They had they were past like 5 years. Like it had gone straight to their brain, surgery, treatment, and they were now past 5 years. But the treatment for both of those cases was a stem cell transplant.
Mm.
And so I was like, it like got hooked into my brain of like, okay, stem
This
cell
is the
transplant.
one.
Yeah, I was like, if anything's gonna help, if anything can like give us actual years, good years together, if not potentially cure, I don't know, but it's gonna be that. And so it got it hooked in my brain. So yeah, the Seattle Cancer Care Alliance had a great stem cell program, and so we moved there with the intention of doing that. And so we kind of just hit treatment hard, because in order to do a stem cell, there needs to be no sign of active cancer in your body. And so uh, we were like, we were doing the consult with the stem cell transplant team, and one of the things he needed to do was get scans like right before we were going to go in. And he had recently had scans and everything was looking good. Everything was looking good. And so we were like, oh my gosh, okay. Like I was mentally preparing for how hard, uh, I mean, we were both mentally preparing for how hard the stem cell itself was going to be, because that is like, it's like creating a baby immune system. Like it's
Mm.
like you are an infant again, basically. Like you have nothing. And it's a lot of shuttling back and forth to the hospital for like months after. And so we were like mentally preparing for that part of it, because we were like, okay, it's like right here. And we got the scans like right before, and there was another spot in his brain. And it was like the most devastating thing ever. I just, I think because like Colten had never looked at his prognosis, and I had, and then as soon as I found out about the stem cell, it was like I had completely shoved that to the back of my brain. I was like, prognosis be damned. It does not
Mm-hmm.
matter, because now we have this, and this, like, if other people have done it, why not Colten? Why would it not work for him?
Mm-hmm.
And so I had held on to that so hard that it was devastating for Colton, of course, but it just like, I feel like it just took the wind out of my sails, the wind out of my hope. And it was, it was, it took some time to recover from that. But, we kind of just went back to the drawing board with his oncologist, and we were like, okay, well, tell us about prognosis. And his oncologist was just like, it is so hard to do that. Like, I don't like to do that because every person's different. But he basically was like, I think you guys would be extremely fortunate if you got to spend years together, like plural. And so I was like, okay. We both were kind of like, in our minds, we were like 6 months to a year. So we just started living our life based on that. We went to the most, like the quote unquote easiest maintenance chemo that I had found other people were able to do for an extended period of time and keep it at bay, which this oncologist had never done before. But I was like, listen, I like printed off so many like studies of how it was like helping specific, like, because at the time, like, I was obviously not a doctor or an oncologist, but I knew the lingo of the sarcoma world so well that I was just like I was like, okay, I know this chromosome, whatever, is like reacts to this well, and so it's okay that it's not his specific cancer because it's the same kind of whatever chromosome going on, and so blah blah blah. So I like presented my case to him for this like specific chemotherapy, and he was like, okay, like if you want to try it, all right. Like we'll see how it goes. And by the end he was just like, I'm really glad you guys pushed for that, because now I have that in my repertoire. I get, yeah. He's like, and I never would have considered it, but it was definitely, it allowed Colton to live in a way we had not been able to live since before he was even diagnosed. We went skydiving, we traveled. I mean, yeah, I met you when we were traveling to Hawaii.
Yeah.
And we went to Hawaii multiple times. We just, yeah, it ended up, we did our vow renewal in our place in Cannon Beach, Oregon with our family and friends, and it was beautiful. And it ended up being just a little over a year after that he passed away, and his health didn't steeply decline until the last 2 months, because he needed 2 additional brain surgeries, and those brain surgeries were kind of the beginning of the end of his health decline. Because I look at pictures, and like even a week before that brain surgery, the one of 2 of that year, you would never look at him and be like, yeah, this dude's got cancer, like he's sick, he's not doing well. Like you just looked at him, but by the end it was,
When you are really missing me or mourning for me, I don't want any part of it to be just that I'm dead. Because, like, I don't want it to be sad that I'm dead. Like, of course, you're going to miss me, and you're going to wish that you could be with me, and I don't want to take that away. But I want you to know and remind yourself that I am no longer in pain. And when I do die, although it will be sad, I won't be in pain anymore, babe. And I will be at peace. I will be at peace. I will be free. And so I just want you to remind yourself that when it's tough, that you don't need to be sad for me, on top of being sad about everything else.
I remember a post that you shared like when it was coming maybe towards that end period, and you were talking about hope and how like at the beginning hope was, it was kind of like hoping for this treatment to work or the tumor to localize or to be able to do this or that. And it then hope became like kind of the way y'all lived that last year. Like hope is that Colten can live in these ways and do these things and experience these moments that we can like laugh together and hold each other and be with loved ones. And that is, I feel, the window of time I met you two at. And it was the most beautiful thing to witness. And I think so many people out there are in this space where like there is a terminal diagnosis. Death is gonna happen. And for so long we try to fight it and we resist it. But I think as painful as it is, something really beautiful can happen when you embrace the hope of living in the way that you two did. And that's just one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And I think it's a really important thing to share because so many people just continue to fight it in the other way versus like, let's just live these moments the way we want to live them while we're here for this short window of time and hope that we get this day.
Yep. And I say this anytime it like comes up about his actual death, his passing, and we, we were fortunate enough to live in a state that allowed death with dignity. Mm-hmm. And I truly believe us being able to like take advantage of that was a huge part of how his death could act. Like I can look back even after, even minutes after he took his last breath, I can look back and say that was the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced because it was on his terms. It was like he finally, none of this had been on his terms. Mm-hmm. It was like he finally got to have it on his terms and be surrounded by the people he loved and who loved him and just have it be beautiful. Like I don't know how else to describe it. It's such a horribly beautiful thing to be a part of. To, his mom was there, the person who brought him into the world. And it was beautiful to be a part of her and I seeing him out of it. It's hard to describe, but yeah.
I was in the hospice room with my grandmother about a year ago when she was passing, and being there for that moment, it's the hardest but again like most beautiful thing. And like as she was like ready to die, and she wanted to die. She was like, I am done with this. This sucks. Like I'm in pain. I'm over it. And when she could just like let go and embrace it, it made it so much more beautiful for all of us. And I feel that Colten did something really similar where it's like, when we stop resisting and not stop fearing that ultimate thing that we think is an end, we can like fall into the beauty of this gift that it can be. In this like, I feel like you have a similar perception of grief from what I see, but death is a finite end of a physical body, and it's a beginning of a continued relationship through grief in a whole other way, and through spirit in all these other ways. And that can give us the window for that a little bit more.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. And yeah, the being ready to die is just such a, I don't like, it sounds almost morbid to say it's inspiring, but like having watched him for 3.5 years just suffer, like when I think about what makes me the saddest, when I like think and get like really sad, is just how much he suffered. Like
Mm-hmm.
how much he suffered. It's not even like the dying,
Yeah.
because he was ready. Like
Yeah.
we filmed like we had a we I listened to your podcast episode with the death doula
Mm-hmm.
and we also had a death doula who's still actually my friend, and um she calls it like the sacred hour before you take the medication that ends your life, an hour before you take the anti-nauseas that will just make sure everything stays down and it
Mm-hmm.
runs smoothly. And so there's this hour between that she calls the sacred hour because she's just seen the most beautiful things come out of families and people and loved ones.
Mm.
And so we film, like I just set up my camera or my phone nearby to film it, and I sometimes go back and watch it, and it really is, and he really was ready. Like he says at some point he's just like, I just want you guys to know that if I could stay I would, but I can't.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm excited, like I'm
Yeah.
so excited to not be in pain,
Yeah.
because at that point his pain was absolutely out of control, like nothing
Yeah.
could control it. And yeah.
I want you to be happy. I want you to do things that make you smile. I want you to do things that are fulfilling to you, that make you feel seen as an individual and makes you feel like you're honoring yourself. And that is extremely important to me. I want you to be happy, and I want you to do things that make you happy and that make you feel like you. Because I love you. I love all of you. If you need my permission, then you've got it. Wherever your heart takes you, I want you to go. And I want you to see and do whatever your heart tells you to. Also remember that it's your heart we're talking about, not your brain. I'm just really proud of you, and I love you, and I hope that you can do something for you today, and that makes you feel happy to be alive, because I am very happy that you are alive, because I live on in your memory, and all the love that we shared still exists. So I want you to continue living and loving, because that's what I would do, and that's what I would want to do, is to keep living and loving.
I didn't understand the gravity to what Colten was saying when he said this. Um, but I just like distinctly remember him telling me like I wouldn't be alive right now if it weren't for Gabby. Like I wouldn't be living here right now. She's like been my fighter, been my advocate. She's like why I'm here today. Why I've made it this far, and just like hearing this back story, it becomes that much more apparent. And I feel like I obviously didn't know Colten very well, but I feel like you were the most important thing to him, and what he wanted most in his passing was for your life to bloom and bud and continue. So I guess my question for you is like what gave you the strength to carry through, like taking care of him through that, and like how did you stay okay through that time, for anyone who is in that position listening? And then what has helped you in your grief in the way that like you honor him in your life every day and you're still living, and you're you have a wonderful partner who also honors Colten in your life, and just like how are you being supported in this time in your life as well?
um well, to be honest, the first year of his diagnosis was just rough for both
Mm-hmm.
of us. Like, so I don't know that I guess maybe if, somebody else is going through this, it's okay that it's just rough.
Yeah.
Like, it just is like, I feel like we were so just surviving, and it just had to be. Like, um, the first couple months, I had never really considered myself one that like really struggled with anxiety. Like I would have anxious
Mm-hmm.
moments, as everyone does, but I that the first couple months of his diagnosis, I went to the my GP, who I ended up just going to the same GP that Colton had gone to that found Colton's cancer. It was just
Mm-hmm.
easier that way. And
Seems like a trustworthy person too.
yeah, yeah. And I ended up seeing him like 4 or 5 times in the span of like 3 months because I would go in and just be like, I think I'm having a heart attack. I think
Mm-hmm.
I'm having a heart attack. And he would like listen, look for all the signs. He's like, you're not, like, you're okay, you're not. And then by like, the fifth time he would just like sat me down. He was just like, Gabby, what you're going through is a lot. Like, it's a lot. And what you may be experiencing is anxiety and panic attacks around that. So you're not dying.
Mm-hmm.
I promise. Like, he was just like, I can give you like resources if you want them. I can give you medication. Like, you tell me what you need, and like, I'll do the best I can, basically. And growing up Mormon and like with my family background, I was so like very much stigmatized against any sort of mental health help in general, even if it
Mm-hmm.
like medication therapy, any of that. And so I was kind of like, that scared me, and I didn't do anything about it. And then after the first Christmas, when he had, that first Christmas, my family all came to spend Christmas with us. And when they left, oh my God, it hit me so hard. I just laid on the couch for like 2 weeks and couldn't bring myself. Like, Colton was in our room recovering, and I was just in the living room on the couch, just so depressed. And my sister uh, told me, she was just like, if I find you a therapist that I really think could help you, like, would you just do a consult call with them? And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, yeah, sure. Sounds like good luck finding one that I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, like excited about, or not even excited about, but like, yeah, I'll trust you.
Mm-hmm.
But she like took weeks to look into the therapists around me, and she dialed it down to one. And she was like, I feel so strongly that this is going to be the person for you. And I was like, okay. So I like looked at her website and all that, and I was like, yeah, okay, I can get behind this kind of. So I did the consult call, and like from immediately, I just felt so safe with her and understood. And it turns out she had cancer as well when she was
Mm-hmm.
younger, and she had a son that died tragically. And so she had like all this experience that I was like, and she left a very repressive religion. I cannot remember which one, but she had like a very similar background. And so I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh. And her approach to therapy was, I really could get behind. It was very mindfulness based. And um, she eventually got me to be able to meditate and like be able to calm my brain down and just like exist and just like pay attention to what's happening around, like be present to what is happening around me instead of like what's going on in my head. It's like, okay, get out of your head. What does that actually feel like? She like
Mm-hmm.
taught me how to like
Embody it.
feel in my body. Yeah. And
Mm.
so that truly, truly, that was like such a life-saving thing for me, to have someone who I could trust, who I just laid it all out there. I was just able
Mm-hmm.
to every week just lay it all out there, the good, the bad, the ugly. There was just nothing that I didn't feel like I could tell her. And that just became such a huge saving grace for me, I guess. But
Mm-hmm.
that, and then um, I don't know if I could say this on here, but Colton and I did mushrooms. And so
We
that
did an
was
episode
like,
on mushrooms. Totally
oh,
fine
did
to
you?
say. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. That was like, yeah, the whole like psychedelic thing was like, that's what finally got um me and Colton to both like accept that he was dying. Like after we got that
Mm.
news about the stem cell, like we did mushrooms with some like we had some trusted friends that were our kind of facilitators that made it a completely like safe space that just allowed us to really just work through it together and just I had the most like profound visual experience during like one of the sound things that we did um where I basically was like in this dark room in the visual, and it was like a grayscale. It was like black and white. And there was me. I was like little. It was like a little me in a chair in the middle of it. And I had this ominous like presence of a dark big shadow that was just like
Mm.
walking around me in this room, and it felt like it was like closing in, closing in. And I was scared. I was like, oh, what is this? But then I had told my therapist that I was going to do this, and she was like, if anything scares you, just turn to it. Just turn to it and ask it what it
Mm.
wants, because nothing's going to hurt you,
Mm-hmm.
but it could show you something. And so I was like, okay, big, shadowy, scary thing, what do you want? and, and, it's not answering me, but my inner self, it's like I became like, there was me, and then my inner Gabby came out and it was like next to me, and she starts talking to me, and she's like, what you are about to experience is going to be the hardest thing you will ever experience in your life. And then she like takes my hand and we go, and it turns into this like beautiful, like blindingly white sandy beach area, and she just takes me to the edge of the water, and she's telling me this, and she turns to me and she's like, but I promise you, you will get through it. I promise you'll be okay. And it just was, yeah, that I have written journal entries about it. Colton and I recorded some of our conversations during it, and that like mushroom trip specifically was such a turning point in being able to like just accept what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
Not that it made it easy,
Yeah.
but sometimes the acceptance of it is what's the hardest.
Yeah.
So
That's
yeah.
really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I think that's like a really lovely example of how psychedelics can be used in a profound healing way.
Yeah.
And just like you said, like that resistance, I've said this on the past podcast a number of times, but I think it's like the most true thing I've ever heard. It's that like in life, suffering equals pain times resistance. And
Mm-hmm.
pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And you're going to suffer the degree to which you resist that pain. So, like, if we know that death is this pain that's inevitable, like, we can just alleviate some of the suffering around it by when we just put down that resistance and we just
Yep.
walk into it.
Yep. And I've definitely found that to be true moving through my grief. I just kind of have had to let it be. And I knew from the beginning that that's how I was going to have to do it. That it was going to just have to be okay. If it completely ruined my day, like if I got ready, started work, and I had to stop, like I'm
Mm-hmm.
fortunate enough to be in a position where, I can do that, but like it still sucks,
Mm-hmm.
when you're ready for
Mm-hmm.
the day and have this list of stuff that has to be done, and then very quickly it's just no longer plausible.
Right.
And I did that has been very helpful. The fact that so early on I just, instead of running away from it, shoving it down, I just let it happen. And sometimes I would have to give myself like a time. I'd be like, okay, I need to let this happen for like 30 minutes. And then I'm going to go on with my day. And if it comes up in a couple hours, I need another 30 minutes, then okay, I can do that. But it just has to be, it just has to happen. And that, yeah, that's truly the number one thing. That and having, I do have an excellent support system. I have always felt comfortable, being vulnerable with my people, which is, it's great. It's, I'm very fortunate and grateful for that.
Thank you so much for all of that. I just, for anyone listening, especially if you've listened to these last 2 episodes, I just want to like reflect the profound lessons I think you have like taught me, that I'm like, oh, I like need this part of Gabby in me as I live my life. And like, first of all, being like trusting your intuition and like fiercely advocating for her and that voice inside of you, and not letting someone take that belief away from you, like trusting yourself and having confidence in that and advocating for yourself. That's what you did for Colten too, like fiercely advocating for the ones you love, to get proper care, and like not putting that down, and like deeply, deeply caring for the people you love. Being like fiercely loyal in that, and like the amount of research you have done in both areas, just like if you have a question or something doesn't feel right, like do your own research, dig in and learn. And then really just leaning into this like latest chapter of embracing life's hardest moments, and like stepping into it fully and not hiding away from it. Just like be that little Gabby that like turns into the shadow. Can we all just turn into the shadows of our lives and sit with the hardest things and come to that sandy beach spot and know it's going to be okay? And I think if we can carry those like lessons with us, we're all going to be feeling a lot more grounded and living in a stronger, better space. So thank you for sharing like so much wisdom with people. Thank you for sharing the most vulnerable and hardest possible things to talk about. And I'm so excited for the way you're going to get to continue to live and make such a positive impact on so many lives. Just thank you for being here and for sharing who you are.
Yeah, thanks for letting me have a little platform. Appreciate it.
And I hope that now you have some space to just take care of yourself and replenish.
Thanks. Yeah. No, it's good. Life is good, and I feel Colten like all the time. So even though I can't, see him, I have so many moments of just feeling like he's there. So it's hard to say life is not good when you have that,
Yeah. I remember you saying at one point, like Colten said, if you feel like a gust of wind, don't be startled. Like I'm just saying hi. And I think about that often. My dog, a lot of times when we're on a walk and there's like she'll just stop when there's a gust of wind. I'm like, come on, Luna, like, let's go. And I'm like, oh, we're hanging out for Colten for a moment. Okay. She's like, you forgot.
Yep. I've had, the amount of times like we've had those types of things with like my nieces and nephew and me and my sisters and my in-laws. Yeah, it's so many. Like it's just, it helps a lot to just feel like he's there. So
all of my love, like not even just a little bit of it, all of it will still be accessible to you, because when I give it to you every day, it leaves me and goes to you, and every bit of space in between us, and that's not something you can ever put back in a jar. So whenever you need it, it's gonna be there.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode today to celebrate Gabby's strength and help us to honor Colten's life. If you go to the show notes, you're going to see links for an episode we did with an amazing grief therapist. So if you are experiencing grief or a loved one is, this is an amazing resource. There's also our link to the episode with a death doula that Gabby referenced, as well as links to our episodes on microdosing as well. So you can check the show notes for those resources. And the next time you're outside and you feel a gust of wind, let it be a moment to remember Colten, to remember your loved ones, and to remember to trust your intuition and your inner knowing to guide you, just like Gabby.